Hello, and welcome to Writing Forward, a conversation show featuring some of the best and brightest voices from across Wisconsin. I'm Jeff Aloysia. I'm a former editor at the New York Times, a Milwaukee suburbs native, and now I'm a freelance writer based in Madison. Each week, I sit down with writers from and connected to my home state for candid, sometimes messy conversations about craft, identity, and what it means to build a writing life rooted at home and away from the traditional centers of the literary world. From fiction to nonfiction, poetry to journalism, we dig into what keeps Wisconsin writers moving forward, one word at a time. My guest today is Dantiel Moniz. Born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, Dantiel came to Wisconsin to earn her MFA in fiction from UW-Madison. And today she serves as an assistant professor in the university's creative writing program. Dantiel is the author of the acclaimed story collection Milk, Blood, Heat, published by Grove Atlantic in 2021. Set largely in Florida, the collection follows characters confronting moments of sudden reckoning. Children, parents, siblings, friends, and strangers forced to grapple with grief, desire, faith, violence, and the complicated obligations we owe one another. Calling it a stunning and important debut, author Dantiel W wrote that the stories in Milk, Blood, Heat are like lightning, spectacular, beautiful, carrying a hint of danger. The book was a finalist for the PEN Gene Stein Award, the PEN Robert W. Bingham Prize, and the New York Public Library's Young Lions Fiction Award. Dantiel is also the recipient of a Pushcart Prize, a MacDowell Fellowship, and she was named a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 honoree. Her work has also appeared in the Paris Review, One Story, Tin House, Plowshares, the Yale Review, and elsewhere. And I'm happy to say that her debut novel, Beholder, is forthcoming from Scribner. Dantiel Moniz, welcome to Writing Forward.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. You know, there are times where I try to streamline a guest bio just for the sake of time. And there are others where I think like the list of publications and honors has this sort of accumulative effect and says more than I could ever say. So I want to talk about some of that acclaim. But first, we begin every episode of the show by asking our guests to share a brief passage from someone else's writing, be it a novel, poem, essay, or article that for them evokes Wisconsin in some memorable way. What did you choose, and can you read it for us?
Yeah, so I'm going to read two little brief snippets from All This Could Be Different by Sarah Thinkum Matthews.
I love that book so much.
It's so good. It's like opens up and it's like immediately, Wisconsin. So if y'all don't know, if you haven't read it, it's a character who has recently graduated school and she's just found a job or she's about to, so that's where we are. My boss said, like a god granting a boon, 23 an hour. You'll relocate to Milwaukee, where your client is. I will pay for your apartment. That sounds great, I said. I may have added, I'm honored to get to work for you. All nonsense. Once I hung up, I punched the air and yelled. I remember the restaurant as deserted, but it may not have been. This is not a story about work or precarity. I'm trying, late in the evening, to say something about love, which for many of us is not separable from the other shit. As the summer began, I moved to Milwaukee, a rusted city where I had nobody, parents 2 oceans away. I lay on the sun-warmed wood floor of my paid-for apartment and decided I would be a slut. So I had to read that part. I was just like, it's not doable. But then I just wanted to read this next part where Madison actually comes in. In July, Peter said that we needed a new junior consultant on the project, another me. I forwarded his email on. Tom was unemployed then, still living 90 minutes away in our college town, going to free concerts at the Terrace, taking meandering bike rides around Madison's lakes. His inability to find a job startled me. He was the smartest person I knew. I comprehended at a technical level what a recession was, but not what it meant, truly meant, for the people tumbling into its maw. Some half of my generation never recovered. Thanks, my dude. We'll think on it, Tom replied, and I, in my sparsely furnished apartment, felt my anger flare. I'd reached out in a bid to cement friendship beyond graduation and $1 drinks at bars and burgers at the plaza. In remembered fondness, knowing he needed the job and that he was from around here, he, like me, unlike our most forceful, savvy friends, did not seem ready yet to flee Wisco for the coasts.
That book is so good. I'm so glad you read it, in part because I hope other people go out and pick it up.
Yeah, me too.
It's like it's a book full of ideas that somehow manages not to be sometimes when you read a novel that's full of ideas, it comes off like a novel full of
A
ideas.
novel full of ideas,
Yeah,
yeah.
and she manages to do it without being preachy
Mhm.
and do it within the character and the story, and I thought it was lovely. What stands out to you about those pieces that you read?
Yeah. So for me, again, I'm born and raised Jacksonville, Florida. I came here first to Madison in 2016 as a graduate student in the MFA program where I now teach. But beforehand, had never thought about Wisconsin a day in my life. Like, just didn't have any concept of what it was or what it could be. And now I'm living here consecutively. Now it'll be my 5th year this August. And when I first read the opening of that book, I remember thinking like I had the same kind of thrill, the same kind of frisson run through me that's when I see like Jacksonville or Florida mentioned in things
Mm.
where I was like, oh, is this like becoming a place that I feel at home in? So the one thing is that like seeing Madison or even seeing Wisconsin, I was like, and then the other part of it is that I'm really drawn to this person who has this outsider's perspective of being in Wisconsin because that is still my perspective. So on the one hand, this place is becoming more of a place that I think of as home, but I also still feel like I'm on the outside looking in and trying to figure out like what exactly makes this place and the people who inhabit it tick.
I think that perspective is so valuable. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. Firstly, because I love your book, but also, so many of our writers are sort of born and bred
Yeah.
Wisconsinites. I think it's really valuable to get the perspective of someone for whom this is not a sort of native place.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm
You
endlessly like, whoa.
you mentioned that you moved here for your MFA. I
Mhm.
think you were 26 at the
I
time.
was 26 turning 27.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And you had never been here before. You didn't
Mm-mm.
know anyone here.
Mm-mm.
What were your first impressions of the place?
There were so many more bugs than I thought that there would be. Like mosquitoes and like
Hmm.
spiders. I was like, wait, I'm from Florida. And and not just that there were so many, but like I remember going to the Festival Foods that's on East Wash. It's in the parking garages. And, so like all these webs, all these spiders. So it wasn't just like one spider. It was like a colony of spiders all hanging out. And I was like, spiders in Florida don't hang out like that together. So that was my first thought. But then my second thought was, I saw the lake, like, I was driving by and the lake just, like, came open, and I was like, "Whoa." I just didn't expect, so much water for a
Hmm.
place that I think of as, like, oh, it's in the middle of the country, but obviously, the Great Lakes and all, but I just wasn't expecting. It was beautiful. Seasons are beautiful. I had no conception of traditional seasons before I got here, so it's just been like I don't know, finding myself where if you're on the same rhythm as nature is on, like in the traditional sense of
Yeah.
things turning, it's doing something to my biochemistry that I hope is positive.
I spent a year in California and then I did my grad school in North Carolina. I remember that first year in California just being really like disoriented by there not being distinct seasons.
Yeah.
How do you do with the winter?
So I like it. Like, I think it's cool. Like, like, honestly, really, people are like, you're gonna die. But
Mm.
really, it's proper clothing, right? Once you learn that, like, it's pretty good. My issue with winter is just how long it goes and how little sun that there is. I'm from the Sunshine State, so that's kind of a thing. But I think it's really magical. Like, to be able to literally walk on frozen water or to go out and it's snowing, I still haven't lost, like, the magic of that. I even don't mind so much shoveling
Yeah.
yet. But just really quick to your point about the distinct seasons, I remember very vividly being in Florida and people who would come there from somewhere else would just be like, "I miss spring, I miss fall, my response was like, "Well, go. Who's
Yeah.
stopping you? Who's keeping you here? Go. Who
Hmm.
cares?" And then I experienced it myself for the first time and I was like, "Oh, I get it."
Yeah. I believe you also got into the Iowa Writers Workshop. What ultimately drew you to UW-Madison?
Judith Claire Mitchell, to
Oh,
be
yeah.
honest. Yeah,
She rules.
she really does. Actually, so I had gotten straight into Iowa and I had gotten onto the wait list here, which
Mm.
when you think about it, it does make sense. Like Iowa accepts like some 25 people and Madison accepts 6,
Mhm.
every other year. So that made
Yeah.
sense. But I just remember, even just being on the wait list, she wrote me an email that made me feel so seen. And she was like, I don't know you, and so I can't take credit for anything that you are and who you are and what you've become, but I'm so proud of you.
Mhm.
And I just felt like, oh, I want to be in a place where somebody sees me. Whereas when I got into Iowa, I was like, I didn't get a phone call. I didn't get any of that stuff. And so I like remember emailing somebody and I was just like, hey, I got like a acceptance letter, but so what's the next step? What do I do? And they were just kind of like, you come to Iowa. And I'm saying it like that because tone is hard. Yeah, I understand like tone is hard, but I just remember being like, oh, that's it? You just come to Iowa?
Yeah.
I don't know about that. And so, yeah, and so I came here and I've never regretted Okay, briefly, right after I accepted Wisconsin and turned down Iowa, I felt like every book I read, they were like, graduated from the Iowa
Yep.
Writers Workshop. And I was like, oh my God, I've done a bad thing. But it turned out good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a wonderful thing that Judy did for you. I mean, I think it makes such a difference to know that there's somebody rooting for you,
Yeah.
even someone you haven't met before.
Yeah.
Did you find the program to be competitive? Like, that's another thing that often gets talked about with MFA programs, specifically in the context of Iowa. There's
Yeah.
a sort of weird funding structure where you have to compete with your cohort.
Yeah.
What was your experience like with the cohort of fiction writers here?
I think that we all, when we first came in, we made a very conscious decision that, like, no matter what, we would maintain, like, our civility with each other.
Mhm.
Not just that. So we made it a point to go on, like, field trips together and, like,
Yeah.
go do stuff. So even if we weren't exactly, no one needed to be, like, best friends, but we were like, listen, we're not going to make it contentious because we're here. It's a very small program. Unlike, other programs where you might rotate and do different things, like, you're with the same 5 other people, like, your whole 2 years that you're here. We all get the same funding.
Mhm.
They get way more funding now than we did, which I'm so happy for them. But,
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? There's, like, the normal stuff because we do have to,
Sure.
that's something that's just never gonna go away. You have to be able to be like, "Oh, I might be disappointed that I didn't get this thing and this other person got that thing," which is the human part.
Right.
And the part that's under your control is to be like, figure out how you regulate that so you're
Mhm.
not projecting and lashing out. I think we mostly did a pretty good job
Yeah.
doing that.
You mentioned this in the context of the passage from Sarah's book that you read,
Mhm.
the idea that a place can stop feeling like a place where you're getting a degree, say, and start feeling like home. When did that occur for you in Wisconsin?
Literally not till I came back the second time. So the first period of time I was here was between 2016 and 2018. That's the length of the program. I left. And then I came back 3 years later to start as a tenure track person. So I just remember the first year of moving here and I was like, oh, I live here. Like I kept having that. I still kind of have it a little bit. I'm like, oh, I live here. I live in Wisconsin. But yeah, it's very different to have been a graduate student in this environment because I already knew it was temporary. There was no so, like, I was, experiencing the place, but not in a place where I was like, "Oh, I have to." So, like, when I came back, it was like, "Oh, I need to know this place now as a person who resides here."
Yeah.
And I remember, like, last Christmas, I was back home because I always go back home to Florida at least once or twice a year, because all my family's still there.
Mhm.
But I was with my dad. I remember thinking, like, "Oh, yeah, when I go back home." And I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
am home. I was like, but I do think of that as home. Oh, when I go back home, it's bizarre because I'd never really lived anywhere more than a temporary time anywhere but different cities in Florida. I had a brief stint in Seattle. It was so expensive. I had to come back home. But yeah, so like this is really interesting to have like a place as an adult that I'm getting to know as a home and
Mhm.
that I may like, raise a family here myself. And then that actually messes me up sometimes. I was like, oh my God, my child will be from Wisconsin. Like, that's weird.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
In some ways, you can't pick two more different places than Jacksonville,
Yeah.
Florida, and Madison, Wisconsin. We mentioned that you have this unique perspective as someone who's simultaneously an insider and an outsider. So I want to ask you a question that I'm thinking about very often, which is like, do you think there is such a thing as Wisconsin writing? And like, if so, what does an outsider turn insider notice about that aesthetic?
I'll say it just from the situation of like student work, right? So
Mhm.
because I teach also at the undergraduate level as well as the graduate level, but like a lot of the undergraduates here, I do feel like are from around here. One thing I have noticed is that I feel like it's fine to say y'all, right? Because this is you're from
Of
here.
course.
I
Of
feel
course.
like there's a way that y'all are a little bit maybe like sucked in, like a
Mhm.
little bit like this. And in the
No.
writing, you know, I can see it in the writing, like I don't want to say that y'all are just repressed as a blanket statement, but
Uh-huh.
like I don't know, maybe there's something a little bit more at arm's length about it in a way that I feel like is a little bit opposite to how when I approach the work, I'm like tumbling all the way in. I'm bringing you to the center in like the most uncomfortable place. And a lot of people say that about my work. They'll be like, it's a little bit grotesque or it's a little bit this. And I'm like, I don't know, being alive is a little bit grotesque.
You seem to have such a good sense of self and sense of your own work. I think one thing that struck me about both your fiction and just like reading interviews, I think is you're willing to go there and say the thing that, especially in Wisconsin, we don't always say. Like I'm thinking about, the first story in your book, Milk, Blood, Heat.
Yeah.
I was so excited when I won't spoil what happens in that story, but there's a moment in which like something pretty dramatic happens that I don't know, not everybody's willing to go there. I felt like I was reading a great George Saunders story or Flannery O'Connor or something, but also just being willing to talk about ambition and talk about what you're good at. To give you a quick anecdote from my own graduate school experience, I remember the first time I took a long form fiction class, the first class, I had a great professor named Nina de Gramont, and she had us all go around the room and say, before we even like got into reading each other's work, it was a specifically a class for novel writing. And she said, "What is your biggest, like most embarrassing
Mm,
ambition for your book?"
yeah.
You know, and all these people in my class were saying, like, "I would love for this to turn into a Hollywood movie, or I would love to have a video game, or to win some great award for it." And I was like, as a person from Wisconsin, I was horrified. And I remember just saying like, "Oh, I'd just be happy if somebody like would publish my book." And for the longest time, I thought that kind of humility was a virtue. And I don't know that it necessarily is. I think it's like
Mm,
important for us to sort of own our
yeah.
value and to talk about ambition. I'm just curious, like, where does your confidence come from?
Hard won over a lifetime of not having been that person, of feeling like I don't deserve first, whatever those reasons are. And for me, I have a lot of systemic external reasons why I might think, yeah, I'm not good enough or I don't deserve this or, X, Y, and Z. But like, I mean, and it's still a process. I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm so confident every
Mhm.
day because that's just not how growth works. You don't do a thing one time and expect it to be static. That's not how living things work, right?
Yeah.
Everything's always in flux. So it's always having to reconfigure and rebalance, which is actually where I feel like I am, having been 5 years away now from Milk Blood Heat and going into this new thing, which is new unknown territory in all the ways, right? A second book is a very big thing. A novel versus a short story, which, the public and publicity makes a big thing. I do agree with you, though. I think that we are taught in a lot of different instances that you have to stay small and humble. Since I've been examining more structures and more like what are the systems that we actually live in and how do they influence our lives, I've been thinking a lot about the question, who does that benefit
Yeah.
for you to stay so small? And there is a balance, right? Ego can very quickly be like, I'm the best, a God complex type of thing. And so it's like the balance of, no, but do you do this? Amazing. You're not the only one who can do amazing things. As like, but if you are doing something that literally only you can do, you have to own that. And I think in the last couple of years where I've come two is that I am literally physically embodied in this lifetime as this person in this specific space and time moment to be a storyteller. So if that's what I believe wholeheartedly, then I have to do the thing and I have to do it in a way that doesn't impede my work. And me being very self-conscious, especially when, like you said, I'm so looking at myself all the time, not in a narcissistic way, that again, balance, but I'm looking at it all the time to be like, if I understand myself, it helps me understand other people
Mm.
sometimes. But if I'm gonna do that, self-consciousness is a detriment to what I'm trying to do in an authentic way. So it's just reminding myself that, and then having a good group of people around me who understand me and love me and know what I'm doing.
I read an interview with you, I think, where you were saying that your first semester at Madison, you didn't really
Oh
write
God,
because you had
imposter
this.
syndrome.
Yeah, to your point, I think, like, as far as who does that benefit, there's so many sort of forces that are either acting against us or that are
Mhm,
just outside of our control,
mhm.
especially when it comes to publishing, which is just such a lottery. The worst thing we can do is get in our own way.
Yeah,
But as you mentioned, I think it comes from hard work and probably having to like earn some confidence.
earn it and
Mm.
stumble and be okay with being like, "Okay, that was a mess up, so what can I do next time?" Instead of being like, "Okay, well, I'm on the floor, so now I have to stay here."
Yeah. I'm curious, as someone who teaches now, do you think we're doing young writers a disservice when we frame confidence as arrogance? How do you talk to your students about this?
I'll say what I actually say to them, I'm like, "Own your shit." It's the same thing when I talk to them about accepting feedback or, like, being in the same place. I said, "I do not want you to take any feedback, including mine, that does not resonate with you."
Yeah.
But in order to actually understand what resonance is, it is a felt vibration in the body. It's something that strikes you, feels true before you think it's true. In order to have that space, though, you have to be so secure in like the direction that you're heading, right? In order for anybody else to be useful to you, you have to know where you're going. How can anyone tell you where to go if they don't know? So I tell them the balance is being secure in that, but also being open to the possibilities of something else. Like I'll say for myself, my usual thing is just to be like a little bit tightened. You know what I mean? I know that about myself. So I know that I need to give myself a moment with it. So if I have that tightening thing, I'll like stop and then I'll put it away for a second. Then I'll go back to it. I'm like, okay, so maybe not the thing you're saying to me, but what you are pointing out is that there's something amiss here. So now you giving me that feedback is giving me something to push off of. So that confidence thing is like being really secure and like, I know where I'm headed. And then the balance of not making it arrogance or something that harms you is like being open to the fact that you don't know all the answers. And if you are writing something, you should not know every single thing because then the thing that you're making is static. You want to be in collaboration with the story.
Well, you've talked about imposter syndrome, especially when you came to Madison. You've talked about confidence. Then Milk Blood Heat comes out, and suddenly, people are calling it one of the most exciting debuts of the year it came out. Did that feel the way you thought it would?
This is what I tell people all the time. I was like, it's horrible to not get what you want. And sometimes it feels horrible to get what you want. A book being published is like usually a whole new set of visibility for someone, like a new platform of visibility that you've never before had. And like not for some people. Some people are like already in the industry and they, whatever. But for me, it literally was like, oh my God, this is like the most visible I've ever been. And I actually remember the night before it was set to come out, I've been waiting for this moment. It felt like it took forever because publishing is so slow. And then I had this moment where I like just sat on the floor and I was like, oh my God, why did I do this? Oh my God, people are like, I'm like, people are going to read the book. And I was like, people are going to read the book. And it was frightening. It was really scary. It was like once it's out there, and it's living and it's going to meet the people it's going to meet. And a book is not for everybody, which is one of the things that I've had to really come to that like, if you've written a book for everybody, what did you really write? And so for me, I'm like, okay, if you don't like my book, maybe it's not for you, or maybe it's not for you right now. It was really scary. It was also really exciting, not gonna lie about it. I definitely remember like really wanting the 5 under 35 just because like, I am an ambitious person. I don't feel entitled to anything, but I'm like, if I'm gonna be real, I want all the things. I want whatever people will be like, yeah, you can have. But I just remember my publicist coming one day and was saying like, oh, Ruman Alam was saying something about, he's writing something and he asked me how old you were. And I remember in my head, I was like, oh, he asked about my age. And this is like months before I found out about it. But like my head was always, I was like, oh, he asked about my age. And then it turned out like he had nominated me for this. And I was like, I knew it.
Own your shit.
Yeah, own
That's
your
great.
shit.
What changed for you from that experience? And what didn't change?
Yeah, what changed for me was I feel like I'm the type of person where I'm always trying to figure out, like, how are other people perceiving me, which makes sense to me, right? All of the systems that we live within, my particular visibility or invisibility at certain different times, you know what I mean? Hypervisibility. It's weird because I'm looking at myself, but I also have the second layer of trying to look at myself how another person would look at me. And I think that when you're a creative or you're producing or any kind of thing like that, that can, again, really be a head fuck to always be thinking like, what are people thinking as you're trying to write real raw stuff that would prevent you? Like you might censor yourself. So I think like one of the things that it did, even though it's external, is like some of this external validation did give me like the permission to be like, okay, I can trust myself because this is what this work is born from. I was like, this is what I want to do. And it's for me at the end of the day. Like people ask the question all the time, or like, who is your reader? And you're like, I'm not saying that you can't have multiple readers. I do. But like at the end of the day, I'm like, well, my truest answer is like, I'm writing for myself. And if I'm writing for myself in that way, and I'm connected to every living entity on the planet, then I'm also writing for other people. What hasn't changed? I still can't get myself to be in routine. I'm always like, I want to write. And then I'll go over and do some other thing. I don't know. The resistance to starting still hasn't changed, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think that's valuable for people to hear too. We get so much the advice of like, write every day. And
I don't. I never have. Sometimes, like if I'm really into it or like I'm a deadline girl, so you give me a deadline, then I'm like, zoop. I just was like that in college. Papers due. I'll wait till like 2 hours before the class, like do the paper. Like I'm still motivated that way, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, your next book, your second book, your novel, Beholder, arrives in 2027. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you. I think it's going to be 2028 now. Yeah.
That is also illustrative of the publishing process.
Yep.
Does writing a second book feel different when you know that people are waiting for it?
Yes. So I'm going to tell you something that Lauren Groff told me. We were together in Key West, and I had said that to her where I was like, oh, yeah, people always talk about the sophomore book or the second book being hard. So anyway, I said that to her. I was like, oh, yeah, it's just like a lot of pressure because, people are waiting your book. And she looked at me, she goes, Dantiel, nobody is waiting for any of our books. And I was like, okay, Lauren.
Yeah.
I was like, but then I was like, well, that's not exactly what I mean. I don't mean that anybody's waiting on the book. I mean, they have expectations of the book, right?
Yeah.
It's an obviously huge gap between 0 and 1 books, right? Having 1 book opens up so many things. But I think there is a similarly large or larger gap between 1 book and 2 books because, and I hope it's really small between 2 and 3, but I think that's the last gap.
Mhm.
I think once you do 3 books, you should be like solid. But yeah, I think there's a lot because there are expectations now. And if your book did well in any way, shape, or form, then those expectations might be higher or like, I don't know, you know what I mean? But yeah, the expectations exist. I also have the feeling of like, what if I choke? You hear a lot of stuff about like, no one's second book is a good book. And I'm just like, is that real? Well, I'm going to try to not do that.
Who says that? Come
Not
on.
so many people. But I just feel like, yeah, it's very different in terms of the expectations. Expectations for myself. I was a finalist for a lot of stuff, but I didn't win any things, right?
Mhm.
And so part of me has the pressure on myself where it's like, well, I want to win this time. You
Yeah.
can't control that. Like, you know what I mean? And then being behind some of these doors, like with, how these decisions are made, I'm like, sometimes it's not even about that anyway. But yeah, I think it's scarier. It feels scarier to me because now I have this book and I want it to be a good representation of my growth. I just want to always be growing and I want it to be apparent.
Yeah.
I will say I have a story that has like, it really did change at least my mind frame in terms of like winning, losing this whole thing, which is that when I was at the PEN Award, so my book was a finalist for 2, right? So it was the short story prize, and it was also up for the PEN Jean, which is like
Mhm.
the big one of the evening, right? So I'm in these 2 categories. So the first one goes by, I didn't win it. And then so there's like an intermission. And I remember just being in the bathroom and I'm like nervous because I'm like, it doesn't feel great. Like, and also because I was the big prize, they made you like record yourself and then like they'd play your snippets of you reading your thing like throughout the program. And so I'm like listening to my own voice. I'm like, oh, this is so terrible. This is the worst thing that could have ever happened. And then I'm in the bathroom between, awards and I'm just waiting. And this writer, and I wish I remember her name, but my brain doesn't work like that. But anyway, she's standing next to me and we're waiting for the bathroom and she's just making small talk. She's like, "Oh, did your award already go by or are you waiting for it?" I was like, "Well, one of them did." And then she looked at me and she stopped. She goes, "Oh." She goes, "I know who you are." And I was just like, "Oh shit." I was like, "Okay." And then she was like, "I've been writing for a really long time. This is like my 20th book and this is my first time at Penn." And then she just went into the bathroom and that was it. And then I went into the bathroom and I went back to my seat and I was like, this is my first book.
Yeah.
This is okay. Like, there's this fucking pressure on the debut. If you don't do it now, the debut. Life is long if you're lucky, right?
Yeah.
A book has a long life. Like, people come to it at different times. Your career hopefully has a long life. This is my first book, and I am in the room. And I'm not just in the room. I'm nominated for 2 fucking awards for my first book. It's okay. And so when I didn't win the second thing, obviously I wanted to win it, but then I was like already in this jubilation place that I had a great time, had a great New York night. We went to like a 5 a.m. diner. It was great.
Yeah.
And I had a really good time. If I hadn't met that woman who said that thing to me at that exact time, I probably would have been like, I want to go home. I want to go to bed. I'm done with New York
Yeah.
forever.
There was a wonderful profile of you earlier this year on Wisconsin Magazine that I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
people read. And there was a quote that something you told your students, and I hope I don't misquote you
Yeah.
here. You said, "A short story is a slice of something that represents the invisible whole around you." You also said that endings that feel more like windows
Than
than
doors.
doors
Yeah.
are. I love that. How do you achieve that? How do you know where a story should end? I'm thinking about stories in your book. Specifically, I'm thinking of Thicker Than Water,
Mm,
where the 2
yeah.
protagonists, 2 half siblings, they're going to spread the ashes of their father. I won't spoil anything, but you would think that it would end with them spreading the ashes of their father, but it doesn't
Mhm.
end in that place.
Mhm.
How do you achieve that?
So, a couple things I want to say, which is one, thank you so much for saying that about the endings, because I think that that was like the primary like negative critique I got. It's
Mm,
like none of her endings have resolutions; they just end. And I'm like, no, no, I've asked you to do some work.
yeah.
I've given you everything you need to understand like what it is that goes past this last sentence, and that's what I mean by like windows versus doors. It's like something you look out at instead of exit completely. I hope you know what I mean. And not everybody wants to do that work, and which is fine. This is the other thing. So you're asking me like how did I do that thing? For this book, every single one of those, I knew the ending first, and then it was like I was working my way towards
Mm,
that ending, or at least I knew the image kind of where I
yeah.
wanted to end. That is completely changed having worked on novels for the last few years because I've worked on not one but two. Only one has been like workable, but I actually have a really sad feeling in my body that I don't know how to write a short story anymore.
Mm,
So, like, now I'm like, I can't tell you how I did it. Just I know that I did it at that time, but it started with the endings coming to me and being like, "Oh, this is something that I feel like, so for that story in particular, for me, it's not about even though that is the thing that these 2 siblings are going to go do, which is spread these ashes, what really is the point of that whole story is, like, the distance that has grown in their relationship, like, how
yeah.
far away they are, and so, like, the last image is something like they're walking they're, like, apart from each other, and she's, like, watching her brother, and she's like, "Oh, they're at the distance where you can't tell if they're coming closer or they're moving further away." And I just feel like that's, like, the whole point. That's the energy of that story, and just like in real life, there is no neat ending for that. You know, likely, they're not gonna fix their relationship overnight. This thing is not going to do what their mother had hoped it would do, which is bring them closer together. They're likely gonna do this thing, it's a chore, and then they're gonna keep drifting. Maybe, I mean, we don't know, right? But that's the whole point with these endings. We don't know, and I don't like it feels disingenuous to me to be writing so much about life and then to be like, "I have the answer."
Yeah.
The answer is in flux all the time. What do you think is going to happen to this person? Can they change it? Maybe, but we don't see it here. Yeah.
I think that's something I love about short fiction. Of just saying, like, here's a moment in time. Part of why I think I respond to your book so much is because it was clear to me that you were writing to an image. And I think there's something so cool about having an image in your head, saying, what does that image represent thematically? And how do I get there?
Yes. That's the fun part,
Yeah.
right? It's not just like, oh, I have this idea. Like, obviously, sometimes it comes with ideas or conceptions of things. But that an image is an image unless you have the emotionality building up to make it mean something by the end. And like by the time people get to the end of my stories, what I hope is that that meaning, that feeling, whatever it is, reverberates all the way back to the beginning and they can see like how we got there. And like my favorite things that happens to me when I'm reading, and I'll go back and I'll read the beginning. I'm like, oh, I can see how you were taking me here the whole time. That's what I hope.
Yeah. I think that really rewards multiple readings too,
Yeah.
which is what you want with the great
Hmm.
story collection.
And I want people to pay attention. So sometimes when people don't get it, I'm like, well, it could be a number of things, right? It's not for you, which is totally fine. I was like, or you weren't really paying attention. Like, I do think that I have like a problem a little bit when people are like, oh, read just short stories. It's for shorter attention spans. Like, if you don't have enough time, I was like, no, I think it's the opposite. I think you really have to be
Yeah.
paying attention. That's why people are like, I don't get it. I don't understand short stories. Same with poetry, right? You
Hmm.
just have to pay attention,
It's also a cool thing about starting a career with the short story collection is that
which
I'm
nobody
almost
wanted me to do.
yeah, I'm almost surprised it doesn't happen more often. I mean, I think it's a good way to establish somebody as like a writer's writer. There's something about us all starting as short story writers
Yeah.
for the most part and having a serious literary pedigree. And it's also a chance to say, like, here are all the themes I'm interested in. Maybe not all of them,
Yeah.
but a group of them. Whereas with a novel, like, you get maybe three or four, that you have to sort of dial in on. And that feels like a wonderful jumping off point to build a career from.
You'd think. I think a lot of the all the stuff about that you hear about short stories, "Hey, they don't sell, blah, blah, blah." I think they're self-fulfilling prophecies because it's
Yeah.
the market itself who's saying they don't sell. It's like, "Oh, they don't sell," and then you don't put any publicity dollars behind it, so nobody knows about it. So, of course,
Mhm.
nobody buys it. But when I say nobody wanted me to do it, I don't mean my direct team.
Yeah.
Like, I literally, like, my agent, I had maybe half of these stories, and I was on, like, an Elizabeth George grant. I'm not good with unstructured time, which is another thing
Mhm.
that I learned. So I was like, "Yeah, I don't have to work for anybody, and I can just do, whatever I want." And then whatever I want was just, like, kind of, misting around like a little breeze, and I was like, "Oh, you need to get to work, like, this is half over." But I was struggling with the novel. I had a lot of these already published. I was almost finished. I knew I had a clear deadline, and I just was like, "Hey, I know we meant for the novel to come out first, but I need to get paid. I need to, like, figure out
Yeah.
what's next. Can we do the stories instead?" And she was just immediately like, "Yeah, that makes sense to you. It makes sense to me." And so then she curated my list to only send it out to editors that she knew valued the short story as an art form for itself rather than just as a vehicle for the
Yeah.
novel. Do you know what I mean?
That's
And
awesome.
so then
Yeah.
it fell into the right hands. It fell into, like, really enthusiastic hands. Like, my editor, Katie Racian, is, like she's who's I'm working with on this next book and is, like, one of the people that I trust above all with my work and my vision, right?
Yeah. I think that's great because I've heard of the opposite happening too, where a publisher will buy they'll give them a 2-book deal
Mhm.
so that they can have the novel, and then they put the story collection out
The
second
stories are just like,
and
"Meh."
put no
Yeah,
power behind it.
yeah. And that's not how I'm like, "I want you to value this is what I'm working on.
Mhm.
If you don't like it or you don't want to or you're scared about the self-fulfilling prophecy of, like, the short stories, like, that's fine, you can tell me that, like, that's fine, but let me go and work with somebody who actually doesn't feel that way, and they're gonna put in the energy and effort to put the work out in a way that is meaningful in the world, and I do feel like that happened with Milk Buddy. I could not have imagined, like, that book doing what it did.
Yeah. I wanna dig a little bit deeper into theme.
Yeah.
One thing that runs through so much of your work is this interest in mothers and daughters, parents and children, the way that families shape us. I think there are some, like, wonderful portraits of, like, just parents who are people with their own lives,
Yeah.
just something that I think takes us some time to
Yes.
learn. What keeps pulling you back to those relationships in your fiction?
So I say this a lot when I've talked about this book, but I literally didn't know that I was writing about motherhood and daughterhood at first. I thought I was just writing about like a more kind of larger theme of like, what is the nature of good and evil? So like what happens if you have a choice that you wouldn't say was a good choice, but at that time is that character feels like that's their only recourse to getting justice, to protecting someone they love, to protecting
Mhm.
themselves, whatever it is. And it was only after I finished what I thought was a first draft of every story in the book that I kind of was like, oh, even the ones that aren't really about the mothers are about the mothers
Mhm.
and like relationships. But yeah, it took me a while to understand that as a theme. And then I will say that I have not let go of that theme yet. Yeah, this next novel that I'm writing is so totally about, like, I like the way you said that, like, families and the way they shape us. I was just recently watching the Sean Combs P. Diddy documentary that's on Netflix about the whole case and everything that he did, which was really, I'm watching it because it's so centered in New York and, this upbringing, and a part of my book is set there. There was one thing that one of the people being interviewed said, and he was basically like, "You can be shaped by love or you can be shaped by pain." And it's very clear, it becomes very clear over time when somebody's shaped by pain
Yeah.
and how their interactions were. And I just watched this like yesterday and it struck in my head, it like resonated in my whole body. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm exploring. What is it like to be shaped by love or shaped by pain? And how does that influence how you literally are able to connect or not connect with everyone you're in your life, especially those people that are your family, right? So, what I think is that exactly what you were saying, like sometimes it takes us a long time to understand that our people are like our parents are separate people, like separate from their roles of us.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't ever do that, right? And I think I had that moment pretty early on, relatively early on. I think I was like 22. And it was like my first moment of like looking at my mother. And we had like a really turbulent relationship, like basically when I turned 14. Like I knew she loved me, but it was like sometimes like it's like this love is not the love that I want. You know what I mean? Or like, it feels challenging. And it was like I was 22 and I was like, oh, it's her first time on the earth. I literally put that, I gave it to one of my characters in one of those stories in the collection. I think God, I don't even remember The Hearts of Our Enemies, where she's like, it's her mother's first time on this earth. And, maybe she's doing her best. Maybe her best isn't always good enough for me or like what I want. But it's like, I think that, I don't know. It just putting that into perspective really made me think of my mother as a whole person. And that's how I want to deal with like all my characters in the books too, is like whether I agree with what they do, whether I would do what they did, I still want them to feel like people who at the end of the day, even if you're like, well, I wouldn't want my best friend to do that or blah, 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 you could still be like, oh, but I can understand how they came to that decision. So whatever's going on with me and mothers and daughters and everything, it's still there. I'm still doing it. There'll be a whole new book
Yeah.
of, like, exploring that intergenerationally, so
I remember, like, being in my first sort of adult relationship and realizing, like, "Oh, my parents are 2 people in a relationship."
yeah.
And, like, that seems like such an obvious thing, but, yeah, I think it takes getting a little bit of distance from childhood and also becoming an adult yourself and sort
Yeah.
of, um I hope you don't mind me going down this path. I know
Yeah.
we don't know each other that
Mhm.
well, but, I know that you lost your mom in
Mhm.
2022
Mhm.
shortly after Milk Blood Heat came out. Um, I also lost a parent several years ago. I think one thing that has surprised me was, like, how many assumptions I didn't realize were built around that person's continued
Yeah.
existence. We have everything sort of slots in a place. Did losing your mother change the way you understood yourself or your
Changed
writing?
everything. Changed everything. I am not the same person that I was. It's one of those things that sounds really, obvious or maybe cliche when you haven't experienced it yourself yet. No, everything completely different. Phew. Obliterated and, like, currently, like, reforming. I actually when you were saying, like, "Oh, my parents were 2 people in a relationship," I actually had the thing where I realized, "Oh, my parents loved each other. Oh,
Mm,
they were in love," because I never knew that. Like, my
yeah.
parents, were never married. They had me, like, really young. They were both 19. So I was always used to, like, having them in separate spaces, you know what I mean? But I just remember, like, it was on the same day. It was actually the last time I'd seen my mother alive. I had gone back home right before the Penn Awards. I went to Florida for a couple days, and then I flew to New York from Florida. But I was with my mom, like, earlier in the day, and she was saying something about, like, "Oh, I don't know, maybe, like, the last time that I felt really truly loved by anybody was, like, with your dad." And I remember, like, thinking in that moment, I was like, "Wow, that's, like, sad. Y'all were so young."
Mm.
And okay. And then later, very separately, my dad was like, "Oh, something, when women are done with you, they're done with you. Like, when I was in love, blah, blah, blah." And I don't think of him as that type of person. So I was like, "Who are you in love with?" He was like, "Your mother." And I was like, "Wait." I was like, "Y'all loved each other? Wow." You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm completely different in every sense of the word. It made me re-examine, like, my entire life, and again, brought her humanity even more to the forefront to me. I mean, it's not great, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But also it's like, it's life. It's one of those things that makes you realize, like, "Oh, this is what it is. Time passes, we die, like, it's fleeting, and what am I gonna do? What am I here for? What's the thing that I wanna leave behind?" Especially when I think about, well, what are the things that my mother left behind? Not just physical objects, but, like, left behind in me. Do you know what I mean? Like, what inside of me is of her?
Has grief changed your relationship to memory or maybe even the way that you write about mothers now?
100%. It's such a weird thing, like I definitely feel like grief came in and opened me up and all these there's, like, no other way that I could see how people could avoid being open. It's such a scary and big process, and so, like, I think it provides like a depth to what I'm able to do. I do think a part of what I'm here on this earth for too is to kind of showcase these things that we would rather look away from, that we would rather keep silent, that we would rather because we have shame about it or guilt about it, or society has told us it's not okay.
Yeah.
I do think that's a part of my project, and so like having to look at myself in the aftermath of my mother's death, which floored me. I actually used to say all the time that, like, when I was a kid, again, because we had, like, a turbulent relationship, I used to be like, "I don't know if I actually love my mother or if I'd feel obligated to love her." Like, I don't how do you know that? And I
Yeah.
and I could never voice that to anybody because 'cause I'm like, "That's not a question that you're allowed to say," right? And then when she died, it was like an immediate, like, "Oh, of course you love her. It would not feel like this if you didn't." Was it always easy? No, but, like, of course you did, and so that was something that for me was, like, enlightening, and then it made me think about, like, all the ways that people go through the world maybe loving each other, but being afraid of that love in some way or shape or
Yeah.
form, so they, like, withhold themselves.
Yeah. But that was a beautiful answer. People have said, like, grief is an expression of all the love that you didn't get
Yeah,
to express while that person was with us. I wish there was some way
I know.
that we could while they're here, because I think you're right. We sort of shut down and hold things in. But
Shut down, hold it in. It's out of protection or out of fear usually. I feel like, yeah, it definitely has changed me in my relationships, so I would assume it has changed me in my writing. I hope for the better, and I hope to be able to see that in some tangible way in this next book, which I am in the second draft of, which is terrible. Novels are terrible.
It is so intimidating.
They're awful.
Well, I want to put a button on this
Cool.
conversation. You have been an aspiring writer now. You've been an MFA student, an acclaimed debut author, a teacher. Now you're a novelist preparing to publish a second book. What do you understand about sustaining a writing life now that you couldn't have understood when you first arrived in Wisconsin?
That we really need to get comfortable with not knowing all of the answers. And I also think that that includes wanting to Google shit to death about how do I do, how do I do, how do I do. That's great. All of those answers and other people's practices and what other people are doing, all of that can be a foothold or a starting point. But I think like it's probably a detriment to sit there and be like, okay, because this writer has this many prizes and this many this and they're this, that the way that they're doing it is exactly right. It's like that works for them. Clearly, you can see that. I was like, but you need to figure out what works for you, and you need to not be timid about if what works for you is different from than what you've heard. I think that that's like the main thing that I have learned or am learning. Like you said, like when we were talking about earlier about the writing every day thing, I'm like,
Mhm.
that doesn't usually work for me. But what does work for me? What times of day work for me? What, what spaces do I need? What kind of boundaries do I need to put in place to take myself seriously? I think that's the other thing. I think because what we do, especially from the outside looking in, like if you have people that you're in relationship with who are not writers specifically or other types of artists, it could look like, oh, you're being selfish or you're just being like, you're not even, you don't do anything. You're just sitting there at that computer. I'm like, no, I am doing a vast amount of mental work and
Yeah.
it's sustaining energy. Like, are you ever just famished when you're writing? Or
Yeah.
like, that's why we need snacks. It's because it's like the mental load is you're using so much energy. But I think like learning to take myself seriously, which started from me in 2015 when I was like, I think I'm going to apply to the MFA. And that it started from there. And then, like, anytime I've poured in energy and protected that space, it has not failed me yet. And so, but just learning to like be able to identify with your own work without needing the validation of others. And then also not letting, once you get the validation of others, like that control, like, oh no, and now if I don't do this, then that means I've fallen off or I've, blah, blah, blah. It's all a balance. It's all trying to just find equilibrium in your practice.
Yeah. You want to do a quick speed round
Yeah,
before
let's
we
do it.
send you on your
I'm
way?
I'm the worst at this.
All right.
Let's
That's
go.
okay. I mean, we all are.
I'm like, "Ugh,
Writers,
I need to write it down."
you're like, you gave me a word count? Dantiel, do you have a favorite place in Madison?
Yes, in Tenney Park, there's a place where you have to pick through all these little trees and things to go. Oh, maybe I shouldn't tell people that. I'm gonna tell you. It's a place in the park. It opens right up into the water if you go into Tenney Park, and you're just right on the water, and then the sun sets so beautifully there. So you can try to find it if you want to find it.
Best piece of writing advice you've ever received?
If someone doesn't know where you're going, they can't help you get there.
Worst piece of writing advice you've ever received?
Right in the morning. For me.
How about a book that you return to over and over?
Okay, so it used to be White Oleander. That's like a formative text for me. But lately, I've been returning over and over to Danielle Evans's The Office of Historical Corrections. Oh my gosh. She's so
S-
brilliant. She's a genius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's a short story you think everybody should read?
I've never read a short story in my life, Jeff. I literally never have. Um, oh no. Okay. Pilgrims by oh my gosh, what's her name? I can see it. How to Breathe Underwater, Julie Oranger.
Okay.
So good. If you like the grotesque.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
You just mentioned this. What's your favorite treat while writing or after writing?
I like to have a matcha latte that I make at home, that at my house. But like for food,
Sure.
I don't know, I just be eating, Jeff. Okay. Like anything that's, tasty. Breads, cheese, I don't know.
Last one.
Yeah.
What's something about Dantiel Moniz that readers would be surprised to learn?
My work comes off as very serious, I think, but I'm very funny. I'm very like goofy, childlike. Like, I'll go and skip with you in the park. I'll go and, you know what I mean? So I think maybe that makes sense why I write so heavy things, because you can't have, I mean, you can, some people do it, but yeah, I'm not as like dark as like all of my writing may appear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dantiel, thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
That wraps things up. Another big thanks to my guest, Dantiel Moniz, and thank you for tuning in. You can find Dantiel online at dantielwmoniz.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating or share it with a friend. It really helps. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes. They come out every Wednesday. You can reach me anytime at jeffaloizia.com/writingforward. That's JEFFOLOIZIA.com/writingforward. I'd love to hear from you. This episode of Writing Forward was recorded at Madison Public Library with support from Dane Arts. It's produced, edited, and mixed by Anya Van Wagtendonk. The theme music is by the Lola Ombre. Logos and episode art are by Tim Burton. Thanks again for listening, and the words of Quick Trip employees everywhere. See you next time.